Hello everyone, my name is Chrissy and welcome to my channel. Today I'm doing a book review of Such a Fun Age by Kiley Reid. This book follows Emira, who's a 25-year-old black woman who's just trying to figure out how to be an adult like I still am at 34. Emira works two jobs, one as a transcriptionist, she does that part-time, and then one as a babysitter to a little girl named Briar, who is the daughter of Alex Chamberlain and Peter Chamberlain. Now this book starts out with Emira partying up with her friend because it's one of her friend's birthdays. Now while out with her friends, Emira gets a phone call from Alex asking if she can come and watch Briar because of an emergency that ends up happening. Emira and a friend of hers goes and picks up Briar and takes her to the grocery store because sometimes when you're trying to kill time with a toddler, you go to the grocery store. While in the grocery store, Emira gets approached by a security guard and a woman, and they insinuate that she kidnapped Briar and that really Briar does not belong with her, that since they look nothing alike, what could Emira possibly have to do with Briar? Emira does her best to explain, hey, I'm babysitting, I'm working right now, so, back off. Unfortunately, neither security guard or the woman get the hint, and while this is happening, a gentleman in the grocery store is videotaping the whole exchange. Emira ends up calling Peter Chamberlain to come to the grocery store to explain the situation, which he does. Now, after that whole incident, the person who's videotaping it comes up to Emira and says, hey, you should probably post this and make it go viral. Make change happen. Sue them. Emira doesn't want to do that. She wants to keep low profile. She doesn't want this to get out that it happened. The guy ends up sending Emira the video anyway through email, and she watches as he deletes it off his phone. Well, this whole event sparks Alex Chamberlain to begin having a kind of odd dynamic with Emira. And before I get into that, I kind of want to explain Alex a little bit. Alex is a woman in her 30s and she has two daughters, Briar and Catherine. Alex touts herself off to be a self-made woman. She ended up blogging and sending letters to different companies to ask them for free samples for things so that she can put them on her blog. She ends up making a business out of this and then does a lot of conferences and does a whole campaign of Let Her Speak. Now, Alex is married to Peter, who is a bit of an older man and he's a newscaster. Now, what leads them up to calling Emira to babysit Briar that night is that while doing a news segment on promposals, Peter ends up singling out a young black man who does a promposal and ends up saying something along the lines of, well, I hope that he asked her father permission. And the fact that he singled out the one black student who did this is iffy and not good at all. And understandably, people got upset. Later on that night, after the news had broadcast, someone had thrown a rock through the Chamberlain's window, which is why they called Emira. After Alex finds out about the confrontation that Emira has at the grocery store, she kind of shifts in her attitude and way of thinking about Emira. She ends up wanting Emira to spend more time with her and the family and ingratiate herself into Emira's life, sometimes in very inappropriate manners. Now, alongside of that shifting dynamic between Alex and Emira is this guy named Kelly. Kelly is the one who took the video at the grocery store of Emira versus the security guard. And this guy and Emira end up dating, and there is a bit of a twist with him and his motivations. And I'll leave you guys to read that. It's really hard to talk about Kelly as a character for me because I feel like a lot of him is tied into spoilers that end up happening. And that's the summary I'm giving. Hopefully it makes sense and it's not too convoluted. Overall, I like this book. One of the first things that I want to mention about things that I like is actually the red flag behavior that Alex ends up emitting. One of the things that I tabbed with this book is red flags. I did not tab all of the red flag behavior, but I tagged some of it. I do want to share one bit of behavior that Alex exhibits that really keys you in that, ooh, that's not good at all. In the past few weeks, Alex had developed what she knew was an awful and invasive habit of returning home, closing the door quietly behind her, bending at the hip, and looking at Emira's phone. The small entryway was protected by another door that entered into the main foyer, which made Alex feel as if she wasn't quite at home and that she wasn't exactly looking through the phone. She didn't know the passcode and she would never use it if she did, but the lock screen of Emira's phone was always filled with information that was youthful, revealing, and completely addicting. I think that part is a good preview of how Alex works throughout the book. She has these horrible and invasive behaviors, such as looking through Emira's phone, but then she immediately justifies it. Like, oh, I'm not really at home and I'm not really looking through her phone. If I had her passcode, I wouldn't use it. I think the author does a really good job of that slight justification that Alex goes through in her behavior. Even when her behavior is kind of some of the most abhorrent, always justifying. That was actually something I really liked because I felt like it gave us this insight into this character of why she does things. And also, I feel like we know people who justify those things. Like, I feel like we've probably had a conversation with someone in our real life where they're telling us something that they did and then they justify it. And you're sitting there like, that's a bit, I don't think that's quite right. Another thing that I like about this book is the relatability of Emira facing adulthood. And what I mean by that is that Emira has feelings that she hasn't quite reached adulthood because she's working 2 part-time jobs, one which pays under the table, and the other one which she doesn't work enough hours to get her benefits. And she has some conflictions about this. Right now, she is getting paid for the work that she does, and it's a little bit of a familiar and comfortable thing. But at the same time, she knows that eventually she's going to have to face that she's going to be off her parents' insurance soon, and she's going to have to figure out her own life, what direction she wants to go, and what she's going to start doing. I do have a passage here that I think reflects this really well. Sometimes when she was particularly broke, Emira convinced herself that she had a real job, a 9-to-5 position with benefits and decent pay, then the rest of her life would start to resemble adulthood as well. She'd do things like make her bed in the morning, and she learned to start liking coffee. She wouldn't sit on the floor in her bedroom, discovering new music and creating playlists until 3 a.m., only to put herself to bed and think, why do you do this to yourself? There's actually more to that passage, but it's a little bit of a long one, so I'll stop it there. But I actually think that's a really good look into how sometimes we think of adulthood. I think sometimes people think of adulthood as this, you're doing things like your parents would. Like, my parents made the bed in the mornings, and they made themselves coffee, and they had pretty set routines and things that they like to do. But as I've grown up and realized what adulthood is to me is different than it was for my parents. Ymira's not quite there yet in that realization, and so it's nice to be able to see that relatability of young adulthood, of when you're still trying to figure yourself out and still trying to get to a point where you're comfortable making your own decisions and living your life pretty freely. Another thing that I liked about this book is a type of mirroring that happens with Alex's friends group and Emira's friends group. Alex has surrounded herself with women much like her in that they're very motivated, self-driven, but they also have some toxic and not good qualities themselves. So I have an example here. In this scene, by the way, Alex is talking with 3 of her good friends, and they're talking about some of the things that Alex is struggling with. Alex, Jody beckoned, I love you, and you're beautiful, you always are, but I'm being a good friend right now and asking how much weight you've gained. Alex looked down toward her neon orange shorts, a mushy pudge made up of baby weight, a gym membership she'd never gotten, and sugar-based smoothies consumed in the sun, poked out over her waistband and underneath the damp tank top. Alex sighed. I'm afraid to check. Oh, God, Tamara said. Why didn't you say something earlier? Okay, sweetie, Jody said, you need to get your SHIT together because you are not this person. You are so good at confrontation and you breastfeed in front of audiences, and you are going to write a very successful book. You need to hang up the phone, beg your sitter to stay, tell Peter to watch his mouth, and get a Fitbit or something, okay? I said earlier that Alex justifies some of her not good behavior, and it feels like in that scene, Alex's friends are justifying their behavior by making it seem as if they're only looking out for what's best for Alex. Now, as a friend, I do think it's natural to worry about your friend's health if you see them go through drastic changes in a short amount of time. Like, if I saw a friend and they lost a lot of weight in like a span of a month and it looked it and they looked gaunt and sick, I would be worried because I'd be worried about their health. But that scene does not speak that Alex's friends are worried about her health. I think they're just worried that she gained weight, and that's weird to me because all of her friends have kids, and all of them should know that a lot of women gain weight after they have kids. Like, it's really hard sometimes to lose the weight that you've gained in pregnancy, and that's okay. It's okay that that happens. Your body is changing. So there's that group of friends, and then there's Emira's friends. I'm going to read out 2 passages for Ymira's friends. So this is the first passage. Shawnee's parents were as rich as Shawnee was generous. Her family's money came from a southern chain of drive-through laundromats, and Shawnee's big-heartedness stemmed from a deep belief in karma, as well as inspirational quotes found online. That's just a couple sentences about Shawnee, but I like Shawnee as a character. I kind of wish she had more time in this book because she is really generous. Like at one point she offers to help Ymira print out resumes and use like the good paper and to even help her fill out the resume. That's a really good friend. That's a friend who's looking out for you. And then this one is about Zara. Despite the fact that she'd known since she was little that nursing was her passion, Zara never discredited Ymira, or the fact that Ymira had no idea what she wanted to do with her life. Instead, Zara often covered Ymira's coat check fees, which for some reason greatly annoyed Josepha. Zara randomly and privately Venmo'd Ymira to cover a well drink or cover charge, and when Ymira didn't feel well, Zara listened to her symptoms over the phone or via text. She'd either respond with detailed advice or say that it was probably gas. So even in those sentences, the only friend that is sometimes a little bit sketchy is Josepha, but even then, Josepha's going to help out too. But we have Shawnee and Zara who are really supportive of Ymira and do their best to help her out. Now, Zara is the best friend, so she is extra super supportive, and she's really good at that. So I thought that married friendship groups really well. Like, you have one that looks like it means to be well-intentioned, but is saying things that are kind of like a little bit, Like, I can only imagine if I had a friend who'd be like, Christina, you need to get a Fitbit or something. I'd be like, I have a Fitbit, okay? 10,000 steps daily. The last thing that I'll talk about for this book, as far as things that I liked, is the theme of subtle racism. Now, this is a theme that does have a pretty bright light shown on it, but I also think that the author did really well of weaving it into some of the characters in such a way that I had to really think about, oh my gosh, her motivation was that for this reason, and also really hitting upon that someone may not realize that their actions are racially motivated or that it is racism in and of itself. But when you look at it through this lens of taking a step back and seeing their actions as part of a bigger piece, you can kind of start to see that it is from racial motivations. As far as things that I didn't like about this book, the last 50 pages for me felt rushed. There were certain plot points which I thought would be addressed sooner, or at least come to light sooner, and then the subsequent pages would be about addressing it. But it doesn't come up until like the last 50 pages, and then it's like really rushed after that. And then the plot point of Ymira's indecisiveness and finding out what she was going to do with her life just wasn't concluded in a way that was fulfilling to me. I don't want to get more into it because I don't want to give spoilers, but for me there's something lacking in it. If you've read the book and you want to find out more about my thoughts on it as far as that ending with the spoilers, feel free to private message me and we can talk about it, because I've been wanting to talk about this book with someone, but I don't know a lot of people who I talk about books to regularly having read it. So that's my review of Such a Fun Age by Kiley Reid. Have you read this book? Did you like this book? Please let me know your thoughts down below in the comments section. Thank you so much for sticking with me, and as always and forever, may get lost.